On this episode of the Easy Prey podcast, I talk with Tyler Cohen Wood about catfishing, coronavirus, and cybercrime. Tyler is a cyber authority with 20 years of experience, 13 at the Department of Defense. As a keynote speaker, author, blogger, and national security expert, she is relied upon to provide unique insight into cyber threats, cyber warfare, risk mitigation, and ensuring that industries have the tools that they need to defend themselves in the digital world. In January 2019, she was included in the Cybersecurity Ventures list of top 25 cybersecurity experts to follow on social media in 2019. I'm your host, Chris Parker, and this is the Easy Prey podcast. Tyler, thank you so much for coming on the Easy Prey podcast. I look forward to hearing about your story about catfishing and your background with that. And can you tell me more about how you originally found out about catfishing?
Sure. Well, first off, thank you so much for having me. It really is a pleasure to be here. In terms of catfishing, so when I first really started my cybersecurity career, I was doing digital forensics for the Department of Defense Cybercrime Center, and I did intrusion cases, but also major crimes cases. And major crimes cases were the cases that involved the exploitation of children. And I'm very passionate about obviously these cases because, you know, there is a definite victim that is in pain on the other end of this case. So it's something that I've been very interested in is keeping kids and basically people safe using my knowledge and my skill set and my background.
Yeah, I know that's for me as I've run my business. I've run across more and more people that have been victims of all sorts of scams, and it's like, oh my gosh, I have a little bit of a soapbox. I need to do something. I need to really help educate people and help make them aware of what's going on out there.
Absolutely, yes. And, you know, how I really got into this, it was something I was very interested in, but I went to work for DIA, which is the intelligence arm of the Department of Defense. And while I was there, I still keep in touch with agents I used to work for with DoD Cybercrime Center. And one of them just told me this awful story about a man who had been arrested for distribution of child porn. And they saw on his computer that he had been chatting with this 11-year-old girl, and he knew every single thing about this girl. And the investigator was like, how does he know this? And fortunately, he was caught for something. He was caught for distribution before he ever met the girl. But it turns out that this guy had been going to the mother's social media pages, her blogs, she had been posting pictures of the kids, and she had no privacy settings, and she was talking about every single thing about these kids. And she did not know that she was putting her kids in potential danger. And, you know, that got me really, really concerned. And I looked for a book or some easy type of guide that would help kids and parents really understand this online domain and vet if who they're talking to is who they say they are in an easy to understand way. I couldn't find one, so I wrote it. Mm-hmm. And that sort of changed the trajectory of where I started going.
Gotcha. I know there have been some fairly large accounts of catfishing in the news. We've heard of young football stars meeting people, and turns out that they're not who they claim to be. So how do you define catfishing?
So I define catfishing as someone pretending to be someone they're not in order to get you to do something or to give them information. A lot of people think of it as just someone in a dating realm where they're saying they're someone they're not. But I think that it's a lot more than that. It's people who are targeting children. But I think it's also a lot of the phishing scams or, you know, a lot of the COVID-19 scams that we're seeing because you're dealing with someone who is not who they say they are.
Mm-hmm. So when it comes to catfishing, what is kind of like the end game? I know when we've had the story of the football player that was catfished, there didn't really seem to be a monetary, hey, I'm trying to get money out of this guy because he was just a pretty young guy, didn't have a whole lot of money. It kind of seemed like this person was just building a fake relationship. So what is the end game for catfishers?
Typically, it's something of monetary value, or it's entrance into your network to steal something, or it's a predator trying to take advantage of you. Usually, there is an end game, but I'm so glad you brought that up, because now is a time where people feel more isolated than ever, and I think you're going to start seeing a lot more of that type of behavior where people reach out just for human contact, and maybe they'll pretend to be someone they're not. But I do think in most cases there is some monetary or some other thing they're actually looking for.
Do you see like there's a particular demographic that gets targeted more than others? I know your introduction was with a young child, but is it specifically target? Like we see lots of scams targeting the elderly. It's just a very common demographic.
Yes.
But with catfishing, yes, kind of on a wider sense, is there a specific demographic that's targeted?
I would have, if you had asked me this question 5-6 years ago, maybe even 3 years ago, I would have said, yes, young girls, women, and people that are a little bit older who aren't as familiar with the internet. And but now I think the demographic is starting to change. Now, you're still going to have predators that are going after kids, unfortunately, and they're upping their ante these days. But they're also targeting CEOs of businesses. They're targeting people who work in companies to be able to gain entrance into that system. Because the more that they know about somebody, they're going to do their recon. And they're going to find out everything that they can, and they're going to start using a lot. They already have started using very different targeted phishing types of attacks that we just really haven't been seeing before. Mm-hmm. So I would say that the demographic is really shifted to most everybody.
Yeah, that's kind of what I was doing research, and it just seems to be that it's just becoming a wider and wider spread. And maybe originally we were looking at it as just fake relationships and trying to con people out of money, but now these things are going deeper and wider and getting considerably more complex.
Yes, and these attacks they always are based on fear or some urgency. Like, if you don't read this new update about COVID-19, you're putting your family at risk. And so people are already, like I had said, they're already sort of heightened with anxiety, and they're just not at their best. So unfortunately, we're seeing a huge spike in these attacks being very successful.
It's almost like I read the news, and it sounds like a lot of in-person burglaries and the crime that happens kind of on the streets and in real life, if you will. Seems like a lot of those have now moved online, particularly with everybody from home. It's like, hey, well, where can I take my scam next?
Yes. And some of the scams are also, they're ridiculous. Like buying toilet paper online for cheap, or, just crazy amounts of money. And I mean, you're seeing just things that I would have never thought that I would see in my lifetime, but I also didn't think that I would live through a pandemic.
Yeah, it's definitely times where what we would consider the norm have been totally upended for, at least in the United States. 96% of people are being told, unless you're, in the health and medical, unless you're providing an essential service, you need to be home. And what are these people going to do for those that, some of us are fortunate that we can continue to work while we're at home, but other people are kind of sitting around, and once you've binged your favorite TV show, and once you
cleaned your house 10 times,
once you've kind of done all these things, it's starting to go like, well, let me look for information. Let me start chatting with friends I have from high school that I haven't seen in 20 years. And kind of we're almost expecting people that we haven't known in many, many years to reach out to us to like, just how are you doing?
That is true. And we're seeing a lot more of that. And I think that's maybe one of the good aspects, is people are really reconnecting in better ways. And people are also exercising more. I've actually been exercising more since we've had the stay-at-home orders than I had before. So there are good things, but what really concerns me is that kids are being targeted now more than ever. And kids are also in a position where they're also afraid. All of a sudden, they're being homeschooled by their parents and they don't have contact with their friends and they're starting to feel lonely. And maybe the parents are working and they just don't know what to do with themselves. So they're going online, and predators know this, and they're very, very good at doing their recon and targeting kids. And they do it through online gaming platforms, through any of your social media types of apps. And it is just so important for parents to really know what is going on with what their kids are doing, who they're talking to, what accounts they have. And I will say there is one advantage. Back in the old days, we used to say, just make sure the home computer's in a place where you can see it. Well, we're sort of back in that position where now it's good to talk to your kids and sit with them and see what they're doing and make sure that you have accounts on all of the platforms that they're using.
So let's dig into that a little bit with respect to kids being targeted. What are some of the things that parents should be looking at, watching out for? You talked about, having access to social media accounts for your kids, but what are some of the ways that kids are being approached and things that parents can do and ways that parents need to talk to their children?
Well, like I said, online gaming, that is a huge way that predators are reaching out to kids because kids think they're talking to, a friend, or they may not know who they're talking to. Or on a lot of the social media apps, predators are actually doing searches for things that kids may be asking, questions they may be asking. And they're using these methods to really target them because they know that kids are in a very vulnerable place right now, and parents are too. Mm-hmm. So there are also a lot of predators will also do a technique where they'll get to know someone on an app that you may know they're using, like Facebook, or, well, actually, do any kids even use Facebook? But Instagram, and they search for certain things. They look for pictures, and you want to make sure that you have accounts on all the same platforms that your kids do. But the problem is some of these predators will start off on Instagram and then move to a encrypted platform or something along the lines of TikTok, WeChat, one of those, or even WhatsApp that is a little bit harder for a parent to track.
Yeah, I mean, we definitely see like similar sort of things happening in dating scams and adults. They meet on one of the popular dating sites, and all the conversation that goes on there, if you looked at it, it looks doesn't look suspicious, doesn't look odd. But as soon as you start, hey, let's take this conversation to this other platform, or the dating websites can't monitor the conversation. They can't see where it's going. They can't see the trigger words.
Right.
So it sounds like it's very similarly, that same concept plays out when targeting kids on kind of kid-focused platforms.
I mean, it really does. And, one of the problems also with predators is once they have a target, they will continue to go after that target. If they see someone that they consider, I can't believe I'm going to say this, Chris, but easy prey, mm-hmm. They're going to go after that. And, this really is a time that you have to monitor what's being done on your network. If you see encrypted traffic that is not yours, that's not on your VPN, but it's something that your kids are doing, you want to ask what's going on. Mm-hmm. And you want to also make sure you know who else is tagging your kids, who their friends are, and what photos or what they're tagging as well. And, now is just such a perfect opportunity to have that conversation with your kids.
Kind of getting to know your kids' friends. And how do you know this person?
Absolutely. And in my book, Catching the Catfishers, I have very easy checklists that are meant for parents and kids to go through together to help determine if someone is actually who they say that they are.
So what's one of the biggest ways, what's kind of like your number one thing on the checklist that people should be watching out for?
One of the things that you should be watching out for is if someone claims to be somebody, but they don't have a normal for that person online presence. If someone claims to be a 13-year-old boy, but they don't have friends on on their Instagram account, or they don't have conversations, they're not tagged in things, or if it will look like the account was just set up and there's no communication, something like that where it looks odd is really a dead giveaway. Now, I used to say, hey, ask them to send you a picture, look at the exit data, see if it matches. And maybe they won't be able to send you a picture because they're not really who they are pretending to be. I'd be a little more cautious about that in these times where there's just malware all over the place.
Yeah. Send me something that I can use to infect myself.
Actually, that's something that I don't know if I should even say this. I haven't heard of this yet, but I think we should warn parents before someone starts doing it. But I can very easily see people who are targeting CEOs or people that are working in businesses, targeting them through their kids to get the kid to download something that is a malicious application that will then traverse through the network, affecting your work laptop and computer, possibly even getting into the network itself. So, you want to talk to your kids too. And I always recommend, it sounds crazy, but have a home incident response plan, especially now.
So what is a home incident response plan? You and I probably know what the technical terminology is, but most parents aren't thinking, if they're not in cybersecurity, they're not in data forensics.
That is very true. So an incident response plan is usually for businesses. If they're hacked, here's what we do. Here's where we keep our backups. If we get infected by ransomware, this is how we are going to handle it. Here's who we call. So a home incident response plan would be similar to your work incident response plan, but it would be something along the lines of you talk to your kids, and if they have, if they download something and all of a sudden they see ransomware, immediately turn it off, turn that device off. You do not want it getting into your network. Pull the battery, as we used to say in the old days, pull the Cat5 cable out, but really disable any type of connectivity. And also make sure that you have your IoT devices and really all of your other devices on a separate network, a guest network, so it is completely separate from your workstation.
Yeah, that's one of the things that I've done with my home. I have I don't think I'm paranoid, but I have IP cameras on the exterior of my house, and a few other devices that are connected that are used within my network, but they're running on their own isolated network where the cameras don't have access to my computer. My computer does not have direct access to any of the cameras. They store out to a common device that each of them can look at, but you can't kind of see across the network that those devices even exist.
And that's so important. And if people have questions about that, it's relatively easy to even set up a guest network through your home provider. But also your business, your IT people may have some solution too that they want you to put in place. They'll have an incident response policy too, but it'll be different kind of from the home one. The home one, sorry to be jumping around, but you want to include things like all of the numbers of people that you would need to call in the event of identity theft or something along those lines. Having a paper copy of all the numbers you need to call, all of your accounts, that is in paper form, because if your system goes down, you need to have that. Plus, I wouldn't recommend having that on your home computer anyway. I would have a nice, or unless you've encrypted it, I would have a good paper copy, and everyone knows what they need to do and practice. Yep. That could be a fun activity to do with the kids.
Yeah, I have a piece of paper in a home safe that has, here's the telephone numbers and here's a couple of bank account numbers in case of emergency, that we know where to call and who to call, and I don't have to find, well, gosh, what is the right telephone number for this bank? Well, if my internet's down, how do I find the right telephone number? Do I
Right.
just one easy place that I can just go immediately down a list and secure accounts or close accounts and things like that if something urgent happened?
Yes. And hopefully your safe is not something that you can open and close with your phone.
No, it barely opens and closes when I manually enter stuff.
Oh my gosh, that's really funny.
Make sure I go out and buy a big sledgehammer in case I can't get into it.
Yeah, seriously.
So when it comes to, let's go back to catfishing again, and we'll bring back to that. So we talked about kind of things that kids should be watching out for. Are there things that adults should be watching out for in case they're being targeted for? Whether I think we could widen up catfishing to be dating scams and any type of interaction. What are some of those things that as adults we should be watching out for?
We should be watching out for, the typical types of scams that you're going to have a URL. Maybe it looks like it comes from somebody that but if you expand the email address, you see that instead of an O, maybe it's a 0 or something that's a little bit different.
Mm-hmm.
You also want to look at the URLs before you click on it to see if it's going where you actually think that it's going. But also, people who are sending you documents, whether it's for work. I guess you wouldn't know on a dating site necessarily, but in terms of email and also in social media, you know your friends, and if they send you something that just either seems out of character or they're using words that just are not words that they typically use, that is an indication of a potential scam. Also, if anyone ever asks you for money on the spot, just walk away. I mean, that is a scam. Also, there's new scams. You really want to be careful that are coming out saying that they are, a COVID-19 bulletin, but it's actually not necessarily a URL that you would click on. It's maybe a PDF with the malicious link inside of it, so that it can get through a lot of antivirus, anti-malware detection tools. So if you get something like that and it seems weird, pick up the phone.
Yeah. Yeah, I've definitely had a few of those things where someone I've connected to on social media that I kind of tangentially know them, or I've kind of known them for years, but we don't really interact on a regular basis, sends me this message, oh, hey, check out this really important thing. And it's like they don't explain what it is or why I should be looking at it or why this person who I haven't talked with in years is now sending me this. 'Cause those conversations don't usually go that way. They usually are like, hey, it's been a couple of years since we talked, but I ran across this thing about cybersecurity and it made me think of you. Is this legitimate? That's how I would expect that conversation to go, not, hey, Chris, click on this. No.
Right, exactly. So yes, you're so right. There will be indications in the words, the terminology, or even the urgency of what someone may send you. Yeah. So you just want to be really careful, and just also talk to your IT department. Make sure that you have the highest security solutions and settings on all of your devices.
Yeah.
And please, if you are working in a room, take any personal assistant device that has the ability to record your conversations and just put it in another room, turn it off, because you don't want for any device to really be capturing any of your work, tradecraft, or really anything about you.
Yeah. And we're talking about that. I have seen people, everybody's jumping on Zoom these days. We won't talk about whether it's secure or not secure, but watch your backgrounds. What documents do you have sitting out that might be visible? If you're taking photos and selfies of hey, look at my work from home setup as you're, you're logged into your company bank account number where the number's in bold, It's like being really cognizant of like what's in the background of your photos when you're doing things that you're not normally doing.
That is such a good point. I am very glad that you brought that up, because that's something that we don't we a lot of people don't think of, and especially now.
Yeah, and I guess that probably applies to even our social media stuff that we really at this time need to be incredibly cautious about. We may be posting more pictures with our kids and talking about what we're doing and kind of releasing more personal information into the wild about us. And maybe we need to be tightening up our security settings at this time, not loosening them up.
I mean, that's so true. But also there's just so much information out there about us. Some of it is what's called OSINT, and that's open source intelligence, which is maybe you bought a house and you can look at Zillow to see how much someone else bought a house for, or where that address is, or court records. Also, be careful about downloading applications, because what was that application that everyone was downloading that made them look older or something like that?
Yeah, it was just a video. Yeah, it was take a picture of yourself now and see what you're going to look like in 20 years.
So you want to look at those apps. You want to see what they have access to, because if you're using your corporate email and they have access to email, or even things that you're putting into your little notes, that could be something that is used to get into your network or access, you, or even target your family and kids.
Yeah,
so you want to look and see what apps on your phone have access to, if they have access to your microphone or your video or your contacts, and they don't need it, turn it off.
It's almost the more information that apps and people have about you, the easier it is to target you, whether it's legitimate for advertising, quote unquote, or criminal activity. It's like, we know you like to go here, we know you like to do these things, and so we're going to use, hey, we see that you like to go on cruises based on your photos and what you're talking about. Let's use that as a way to get into you of, here's this great deal on, not that anyone's going to go on a cruise right now, but but here's this great deal on a cruise.
But there may be people that are still on cruises, unable to get off them. So for them.
Yeah. Or it could be, hey, has your cruise been canceled? Click here to help get your money, to get a refund from your cruise line.
Yep, or something that looks legitimate from an airline saying your recently purchased ticket for a refund, because how many people have purchased tickets, through the end of the year? Lots of people. Yep. So, that's another scam. I mean, basically, I don't think that you should be as paranoid as clearly you, Chris, are, and I am. But you do want to be a little paranoid.
Yeah. Particularly now when scammers seem to be coming out of the woodwork, when there's a lot of fear, there's uncertainty, there's doubt. I feel like I say that phrase on every episode of the podcast, but it really is that fear, that uncertainty, that doubt, that urgency that really gets people in trouble when they're looking at something in the heat of the moment, going, oh my gosh, I need to know about that, or oh my gosh, that scares me, I need to stop that. Take a breath.
It's so true. I mean, I actually almost fell for a phishing attack, hook, line, and sinker back in early January. And I mean, I talk about social engineering. I've written the book on it. I mean, there's just so many things that I teach about. I teach people about this. I speak about it. But I had a very bad week, and it was a week. Our dog of 12 years passed away that week. Sorry. I got really sick, and there was some other crazy thing that happened, and we weren't sleeping very much, and I just wasn't in my best frame of mind. And we tend to make the assumption as cybersecurity professionals that people are always at their 100%. And if we say, look at this link, well, they're going to do it. But people are not always in their best frame of mind, especially not now. Yeah. And so, if in doubt and you're tired or you're not thinking clearly, I mean, I would save it for a better day. I'm not saying don't do your work.
No, but I joke with people, you don't want to have difficult conversations with people when you're tired. You don't want to be making major life decisions when you haven't slept. You don't want to be clicking on links when you're delirious. Kind of all these things kind of falling together of, it can wait till the morning. It can wait till you've had a good night's sleep. In most cases, a good night's sleep is not going to make or break an opportunity or result in you losing a job or something like that.
Right, exactly. And I think bosses, I think people are a lot more compassionate right now to if someone says, I'm really tired, I'm not feeling well, can I take a day off or miss this, do that. You have to take time right now. And I know this isn't cybersecurity, but you have to take time right now to nurture yourself. I mean, whatever that means, if it means doing yoga online, taking the dog for a walk or doing things that make you feel okay and help center you and ground you so that when things are crazy, you're kind of less likely to fall for these types of things because you have that grounded place to be.
Yeah, I mean, that is absolutely great advice. I think it's good advice even when there's not a pandemic, when there's not, yes. When you're not being targeted. It's just good advice to have that space where you can breathe and recenter and calm down.
Yes, I definitely. And, I've seen a lot more people walking around the trails where we walk the dog. Everyone keeps their distance, but there are more people out there that are doing that. And I just think it's so important.
Yeah, I've definitely in my neighborhood, the neighbors that I do see across the street are waving and saying hi. People are writing nice messages in chalk on the sidewalks. And so there is good that can come out of challenging situations. And it's kind of nice to see that there's opportunities for people to come together and be supportive.
Absolutely. And I think it's also very important to, schedule activities with kids, but also talk to kids. When I say activities, like Zoom play dates or things like that. But also, you really want to talk to your kids about what's going on because kids are terrified. They don't really know what's going on. And there's a lot of misinformation out there. And, you turn to one station, you hear a doctor say one thing. You flip to another and you hear an equally qualified doctor say something else. So you want to make sure that your kids understand what's going on and that you let them know that things are going to be tough for a while, but it's not going to be forever. You'll be able to hug grandma again because then kids feel more supported and they feel more open to talking to you and probably less likely to talk to someone that they don't know.
Yeah.
If it's, less likely to maybe fall for predator attacks.
Yeah. If they've been told you can't talk to grandma for a while and then grandma suddenly emails them, they're going to be suspicious of that or tries to connect with them on Facebook or, some channel where grandma is obviously not up and running.
Absolutely. And, also the educators have to be very careful about their home security as well, because I don't know this for a fact, but I just know talking to all the mom friends that I have and family members, since this is also sudden, teachers, they're not necessarily creating lessons, they're just giving assignments. So it would be very easy for a hacker to target a educator or a teacher to gain access to their email list, sending again to parents or kids malicious software claiming that it's homework.
Gosh, too many opportunities to take advantage of people that I
know.
I just want to shut everything off and go hide.
But I don't think that that's the answer either. No. I mean, I think that it's just being aware of what you're posting and what you're doing and trying to be as paranoid as you can be without being crazy paranoid.
Yeah. No, that sounds like great advice. Be paranoid, but not crazy paranoid. I like that. So if people want to learn more about you and what you're currently doing, is there a website, social media that people can go to?
Absolutely. You can find me on LinkedIn, Tyler Cohen Wood. You can also find me on Twitter at Tyler Cohen Wood. You can also find me tylercohenwood.net.
And if people want to read your book on catfishing, what's the title and where can they find it?
So the book is Catching the Catfishers, Disarm the Online Pretenders, Predators, and Perpetrators Who Are Out to Ruin Your Life. You can find that on Amazon.com, BarnesandNoble.com, really any of your major booksellers.
Awesome.
And I know that's a very long title. You can just type in my name and Catching the Catfishers.
And we'll make sure that we include a link to that in the show notes so people can easily find it with just a single click. We promise no malware, no infected PDFs or anything like that. Just a link to a legitimate site. Yes. Tyler, thank you so much for coming on the Easy Prey podcast and sharing your experiences and sharing the stories that you have. We really appreciate it.
Thank you so much for having me.
You're welcome. Have a great day.
You too.
Thank you for listening to this episode of the Easy Prey podcast. If you found this episode helpful, share it with someone you know and leave a review on iTunes. Notes and a transcript of this episode with Tyler Wood can be found at easyprey.com/8. Have you ever been a victim of a scam? And are you interested in sharing your story with the Easy Prey audience? Head over to easyprey.com/mystory to learn more.